Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer on a topic that is absolutely fundamental for anyone looking to create software, write scripts, or connect applications in the Agua Fria district. Today, we're looking at the builder's blueprint for student privacy. Because, before you write a single line of code or deploy a new tool, you really have to pour a solid foundation. We're going to break down exactly what that means, how to architect your tools safely, and why understanding the rules of the Agua Fria district doesn't limit your innovation, it actually empowers it.
I want you to think about how our entire working environment is framed. Public K-12 education is governed by federal law, state law, board policy, and professional ethics all at the exact same time. If you're building tools here, you're operating inside one of the most legally regulated data environments that exists, literally. But I want to be super clear right off the bat. These regulations are not here to scare you away. They're essential, protective guideposts, not roadblocks. Understanding them is just the baseline, and it's what gives you the confidence to build some truly amazing things for the district.
So think of today's agenda as your mandatory building inspection manual. We'll start with building in the district, move on to FERPA and educational interest, tackle identifying PII combinatorial risk, cover the Arizona state privacy laws, and finally, wrap up with your tool verification checklist. Let's start with Section 1, Building Foundation, the District Baseline.
All right, so this is the big one, FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. At its core, FERPA does two absolutely critical things. It gives parents and eligible students the right to access their educational records, and it severely restricts who else can access those records without explicit consent. And the term records is a massive umbrella. We are talking about grades, transcripts, disciplinary files, attendance, health information, the whole shebang. For you as a builder in the Agua Fria district, FERPA becomes legally relevant the exact fraction of a second your application touches any of that data. Seriously, if your tool pulls from a student information system or even just populates a dashboard with IDs, FERPA applies.
Moving right along to Section 2, FERPA and Intent, the Builder's Purpose.
Under FERPA, there are some very limited exceptions that let school officials access student records without parental consent. But to actually use that exception, you have to have what the law calls a legitimate educational interest. So, as a builder, you have to ask yourself this critical question for every single project you take on. What actually constitutes a legitimate educational interest in the context of my software? Where the line is drawn entirely by your purpose. A legitimate educational interest is something like automating a process that a counselor uses every single day to support students. What is absolutely not legitimate, however, is building a tool just because it's cool, or because you want to practice your coding skills, or maybe test out a new API. Every single tool you build in the district must trace directly back to a specific documented student support function. Plain and simple, if you can't document the specific educational purpose, you cannot touch the data.
That brings us to Section 3, PII Risk Combinatorial Framing. Let's look at a real-world example to really illustrate the difference between personally identifiable information, or PII, and non-identifiable data. Imagine a data set that says, John Doe, student ID 12345, is failing math. That is highly sensitive, direct PII. It points right to a person. Now compare that to non-identifiable, aggregate data that just says 14 unnamed ninth graders are failing math. That high-level aggregate data might be all a principal actually needs to allocate tutoring resources. They don't necessarily need John Doe's ID for that broad decision. PII is any data that can identify a specific student, like names, IDs, or emails. But as builders, we have to look a bit deeper than just the obvious identifiers. Here is where it gets a little tricky. We need to talk about a very serious concept called combinatorial risk. Under FERPA, indirect identifiers can also become PII. Think about three separate data points. A student is in grade 11, they're in the drama club, and they are failing biology. Now, none of those 3 points is PII in isolation, right? But if you combine them in a query or a dashboard, you might accidentally point to a single, easily recognizable student. In a small program, or maybe on a specific campus, there might only be one single 11th grader in the drama club who happens to be struggling in biology. Without ever using a name or an ID number, you've just created indirect PII.
So the million-dollar question is, how do we defend against combinatorial risk? The answer is data minimization. This is the guiding principle of collecting and displaying only the specific, exact information you need to accomplish your tool's function. More data is not better data. More data is just more risk. If your tool sends a teacher a weekly alert about students at risk of failing, it should only contain the minimum data needed to prompt that teacher's action. Don't dump every single data field the system has on those students just because the API lets you. Ask yourself at every single design decision, does this specific field actually need to be here?
Next up is Section 4, Arizona Privacy Laws, the State Framework.
Okay, so Arizona actually adds a whole other layer of protection through the Student Data Privacy Act. While FERPA focuses heavily on access and disclosure, Arizona's framework dictates exactly how data is stored, transmitted, and used in digital tools. There are 3 key rules you absolutely must memorize. First, student data can never be used for commercial purposes. Second, student data cannot be shared with third parties outside the district without appropriate safeguards. And third, any tool processing student data requires a mandatory pre-deployment review by district technology officials. This is exactly why the review process in the Agua Fria district exists. It's not just bureaucracy. It's the actual legal mechanism to ensure your tool is safe before it ever touches real student data.
And finally, Section 5, Verification Checklist, the final inspection. To make this super actionable, here is your step-by-step final inspection checklist for verifying tools against district privacy standards. Step 1. Architect for security from line 1. Security is a constraint you design around. It's not a feature you just tack on at the end. Step 2. Minimize data. Constantly ask yourself, do I really, truly need this field to make this tool work? Step 3. Assume public visibility. Design your system as if its outputs could be seen by anyone on the internet. If a data leak would be harmful or legally problematic, redesign it immediately. And Step 4. Submit to innovative solutions for review early. Asking a question before you build takes minutes. Discovering a compliance issue after deployment and having to rebuild from scratch? Yeah, that takes weeks.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really let this thought sink in. Data privacy is not the enemy of innovation. It is the foundation. A builder who truly understands FERPA and the Arizona privacy requirements is not constrained by these laws. They are credentialed by them. Following these guidelines is exactly how a district builds responsibly, and it's how we build trust with families, staff, and the community.
You've got the blueprints now. You understand the federal and state materials. You know how to minimize risk and maximize support for students in the Agua Fria district. So, the question is, now that you know exactly where the lines are you ready to build powerfully within them?